Welcome back to Marvelous Videos. I'm Rylan, and today we'll be taking a look at 10 ultra-violent Spider-Man moments where he went berserk. Spider-Man is a friendly guy. He protects the neighborhood, intends to fight local villains, and save New York City from crime. But the crime often escalates, and Spider-Man finds himself fighting aliens on Earth, fighting aliens in space, or fighting the police in alien suits that make him a lot more aggressive. Spider-Man is also a hero born from extreme grief. Not only does he have a sad backstory, but he often finds himself in a position that threatens the lives of his loved ones. The emotional toll from such circumstances often tends to curb his friendly side and bring out a violence which is uncharacteristic of him. But it also makes sense. The culmination of the pain he has faced in life, or the urge to protect his loved ones against conceited villains, makes the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man not so friendly anymore. Several instances of this are seen throughout the Spider-Man animated series as well as the live-action movies. In fact, even more so than the cartoon, the live-action movies have shown Spidey going absolutely berserk. This is probably because the movies cater to a more PG-13 and adult crowd when compared to the series that usually targets a younger audience. So let's take a look at 10 of these instances where Spider-Man went completely berserk. Before we get into our content, however, we have a very small request. If you enjoy our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is just a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thanks! Now, let's begin.
We started getting some visitors.
Number 1. Spider-Man vs. Green Goblin. Spider-Man No Way Home, 2021. Spider-Man No Way Home is the latest Spider-Man film released in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The movie expands on the multiverse and is the first one to introduce characters from other universes into the MCU. Which brings us to Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, and Tom Holland all sharing the screen as the 3 Spider-Men. The villains from other universes such as the Green Goblin, Electro, and Dr. Octavius also come into the MCU's universe for the very first time. Following a spell by Doctor Strange that goes awry due to Peter's interferences, the fabric of the universe gets disrupted and brings forth Spider-Man villains from other universes. Holland's Spider-Man is overwhelmed by having to deal with so many foes at once, and Green Goblin ends up causing the death of Aunt May. Later, the other 2 Spider-Men arrive to help Holland's Spider-Man deal with the threat and reverse the mutations of the other villains. However, during his encounter with the Green Goblin, Holland's Spider-Man gets consumed by his rage due to his grief from Aunt May's death. This is the first time that this Spider-Man has ever acted out in violence. He holds back no punches and even threatens to kill off the Green Goblin with the absolute intention to do so. He beats the living crap out of him, and in the end, he picks up the Goblin's glider, intending to impale him with it. However, Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man stops Holland from taking a life and is finally able to calm him down.
No! What have I done?
Number 2. Spider-Man beats Shocker to death. Spider-Man the Animated Series, The Alien Costume Part 2. This is the 9th episode from the first season of the series. It introduces a villain named Shocker, who a violent Spider-Man fights under the influence of the alien symbiote. During the Secret Wars, Spider-Man comes back to Earth, but in a different black costume. The new costume powers him up to a greater extent and responds to his mental commands. However, it leaves him more tired than usual, while making him a lot more hostile. His actions get more violent, putting him under the police's radar. A bounty is later put on Spider-Man's head. He seeks out Dr. Kurt Connors for help regarding the costume. Dr. Connors reveals that it is actually made of an alien symbiote, which Peter needed to get rid of as soon as possible. Meanwhile, a new villain named Shocker is introduced as one of Kingpin and Alistair Smythe's ally. When Spider-Man encounters Smythe, the latter brings Shocker along. Shocker attacks Spider-Man with his gauntlets and sonic blasts, which Spidey's black suit was vulnerable to.
Kidding.
Still, Spider-Man managed to find his footing in the fight, and the fight goes against Shocker. But this fight turns out to be way more violent than it normally is. He grabs Shocker and squeezes him hard enough to suffocate him to death, until Eddie Brock causes Spider-Man to drop him. He covers Brock in his webs and leaves him hanging to go after Shocker once again. With his enhanced strength, Spidey breaks a railing to destroy Shocker's gauntlets. He then grabs Shocker's arms and holds him over the edge of the bell tower where they were fighting, threatening to kill him. Throughout, his demeanor and speech is also shown to be a lot more menacing and almost evil. On the verge of death, Shocker points out that his antagonistic behavior is very uncharacteristic of Spider-Man, as he is one of the good guys. This causes Spider-Man to have a flashback, where he remembers the time Uncle Ben explained how with great power comes great responsibility. However, before he can clean up his act and save Shocker, the symbiote suit acts on its own and pushes Shocker over the edge. Fortunately, Spider-Man catches Shocker with his web right before he hits the ground. Number 3. Spider-Man Kills Venom, Spider-Man 3, 2007. Spider-Man 3 is the third installment from Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy, and it follows Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, his experience with the alien symbiote Venom, and his fight against Eddie Brock. The alien symbiote takes over Peter and uses him as a host, bringing out his anger and other negative traits while boosting his physical abilities. This surge in negativity causes him to disfigure Harry's face during a fight and expose his rival, photographer Eddie Brock, for his fake Spider-Man photos, which makes Spider-Man look like the villain. This also resulted in J. Jonah Jameson firing Brock and promoting Peter. Later, Peter realizes that the symbiote is corrupting his brain. He goes to the church where he learns that the sound of clanging metal weakens the symbiote. He uses the church's bell to detach the symbiote from his body. However, he was oblivious to the symbiote bonding with Eddie Brock down below. He was present at the church and also resented Peter following the recent events. Brock intended to kill Spider-Man, now that his darker feelings are fueled by the symbiote. He abducts Mary Jane to take revenge on Peter. He teams up with Sandman and pins Spider-Man down. Harry comes in with his glider to help Peter, but Brock tries to use it to kill Spider-Man. To save his friend, Harry puts himself in the line of fire and dies in the process. Peter grows desperate to defeat the symbiote after his friend passes away. He recollects his memory of the symbiote's weakness at the church and creates a perimeter full of metal pipes. With another pipe in his hand, he begins to bang on the metal to create a sonic shockwave to weaken the symbiote. His plan works brilliantly, and after a couple of sonic attacks, the symbiote detaches itself from Brock. Spider-Man tries to kill the alien once and for all with a pumpkin bomb, now that it did not have a host anymore. However, Brock had grown addicted to the symbiote and jumps into it as Peter launches the bomb. As the bomb explodes, both the symbiote and Brock are vaporized, making Spider-Man the cause for Brock's death. Number 4. Spider-Man beats the crap out of Punisher as Man-Spider. Spider-Man, the animated series, Duel of the Hunters. The 8th episode from Season 2, Duel of the Hunters, follows Punisher, who tries to find a mutated Spider-Man who is now monstrous as the Man-Spider, while Kraven the Hunter tries to bring him back from Mariah Crawford to cure him. Peter suffers from a new mutation that causes his powers to fluctuate. Upon inspection from Kurt Connors, it is suspected that the mutation is irreversible and will prevent Peter from staying human. He gets his hands on an untested serum by Crawford and uses it against her advice, which only worsens his mutations. It even causes him to grow 4 new legs. The Punisher returns and intends to capture Spider-Man, who is being targeted by the police for causing the disappearance of Michael Morbius, a man who mutated into a vampiric bat. When the Punisher finds Spider-Man, he makes Spidey crash into a warehouse. However, he then witnesses Peter mutate into a humanoid spider, who attacks Punisher with his full might. The Punisher gets into his battle van, but Man-Spider jumps over it with monstrous rage, causing the van to flip and explode. He then picks the Punisher up, and looking the furthest thing from human, beats him terribly. In the end, Man-Spider webs up Frank Castle's entire body, except his nose, and keeps him hanging upside down in a secret location. In the end, he is freed by Kraven the Hunter. Number 5. Dr. Octopus vs. Spider-Man, Spider-Man 2, 2004. Spider-Man 2 is the second installment from Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy, which features Tobey Maguire as Peter Parker. It follows the events of its 2002 predecessor, where Spider-Man went against Norman Osborn's Green Goblin. In this movie, Peter's mentor, nuclear scientist Dr. Otto Octavius, works on a fusion power project, funded by Peter's best friend, Harry Osborn. He also wears tentacled arms with artificial intelligence. However, a power strike destabilizes the reactor during an exhibition, and it goes critical. Not only does Dr. Octavius' wife die in the process, but it also burns the inhibitor chip in the tentacles, which blocked the device from his nervous system, causing the arms to go sentient and corrupt Octavius' mind. Dr. Otto Octavius becomes Dr. Octopus, a diabolical villain, and robs a bank to retry his nuclear experiment for the advancement of intelligence once again. However, the reactor can cause the destruction of New York City, so Spider-Man reaches the location to stop him. As the nuclear reactor powers up and destabilizes, Spider-Man reveals himself to Dr. Octavius. However, he cannot keep up with his sentient tentacles. Spider-Man understands that his strength and fighting chops aren't going to cut it here, and that he needs to pull out bigger and more dangerous moves if he wants to stand a chance. Octavius molds one of the tentacles to make a pointed weapon and attacks Spider-Man with it. However, Spider-Man uses his webs to pull up another tentacle to intercept the attack, causing the weapon to pierce the other tentacle. Doc Ock gets electrocuted from taking the damage himself, and the neural link causes his body to experience a state of shock. Spider-Man realizes that since the tentacles are technology, electrical shocks can help him in the fight. He pulls out some wires from the reactor, and the resulting explosion causes Dr. Octavius to take a big hit and fly away into a nearby rubble. Number 6. Spider-Man vs. the Scorpion, Spider-Man the Animated Series. The Sting. This is the 6th episode from the first season of Spider-Man the Animated Series, and it introduces the villain, Scorpion. In this episode, J. Jonah Jameson hires Mac Gargan, a private investigator, to figure out how Peter Parker is able to get such exclusive photos of Spider-Man. To prevent his identity from getting busted, Spider-Man traps Gargan in his web and asks Jameson to get off his case. Gargan cribs to Jameson over how he was always made to look like the fool, and Jameson offers him a chance to get revenge on Spider-Man by gaining the powers of a scorpion, the predator who preys on spiders. The duo meet Farley Stillwell, who mutates Gargan with a scorpion, using the neogenic recombinator. However, after his first altercation with Spidey, the effects of the recombinator make him mentally unstable, causing the scorpion to go berserk. He later heads to Oscorp to use their nuclear reactor to become normal once again, at the cost of damaging the entire New York City.
Web slinging to help me relax. I'd be wound up tighter than a... Now what?
Spider-Man goes after Scorpion and Jameson follows suit. While dodging one of Scorpion's punches, the nuclear reactor accidentally gets activated, which would result in the demise of the city from radiation. Spidey finds out the way to stop it, and Scorpion prevents him from doing so. Surprisingly, Jameson aids Spider-Man, because they have a common enemy at the moment. However, Spidey is no match for the Scorpion in terms of brute strength. Scorpion heads towards Spider-Man to kill him, when Jameson mocks him by calling him a worm and an insect. This affects Scorpion's psyche, as Gargan was already affected by coming off as the fool. Spider-Man decides to exploit his weakness, and mocks him at the end, calling him sewer-faced and second-rate. An enraged Scorpion tries to attack Spider-Man with his tail, but Spidey pulls out some wires and electrocutes the crap out of him. Even though he generally does not play this rough, this time, he needed to do so in order to save Jameson to deactivate the reactor. Otherwise, the entirety of New York City would have to pay the price.
Oh.
Number 7. Green Goblin's Death Scene, Spider-Man 2002. This movie is the first Spider-Man movie from Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy and follows Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker turning into Spider-Man for the first time. His best friend's father, Norman Osborn, faces the wrath of the board members of his own company, who plan to force him out from the board. He gets taken over by an evil entity called the Green Goblin and assassinates them. He offers Spider-Man to be his ally, but Spidey refuses, and the two of them begin to fight. Later, he also tries to kill Aunt May when he realizes that Peter is Spider-Man. He then also abducts Mary Jane to exploit Peter's weakness. Spider-Man comes for Green Goblin and is completely overwhelmed at first. He is unable to even stand for a few seconds straight. To mock him further, Green Goblin brings up how he will kill Mary Jane, which causes Spider-Man to go into a state of rage and fury. He pushes the Goblin back with an attack, causing him to fly and crash into a wall. With his webs, Spider-Man causes the wall to crash down on the Goblin. He then holds him against a ledge and beats him relentlessly into a pulp, and the Goblin is able to stop him only after he reveals himself to be Norman Osborn. He sweet-talks Peter and tells him how the Goblin has control over his mind, and how Peter is like a son to him, while he calls to his glider, hoping to impale Peter with it. However, Peter realizes that it is a farce and does not give in. When the Goblin's glider tries to strike him from behind, Peter dodges it, causing it to impale Norman instead, ultimately killing Norman Osborn.
No! Bench, don't!
Number 8. Spider-Man Evaporates Hydro-Man, Spider-Man the Animated Series. This episode is the third episode from Season 2 of the animated series. It introduces Hydro-Man, a villain obsessed with winning Mary Jane's love. A mysterious thief is on the loose, which makes Peter worried. He steals a pearl necklace from the local aquarium, and the guards notice him inside the tank, where no regular man could have been. Spider-Man appears and chases after him, but he overwhelms Spidey with his aquatic powers. Turns out, he had stolen the necklace from Mary Jane, his high school girlfriend. He tries to reconnect with her, and reveals to her about being able to control the water sources near him. Spider-Man overhears this and intervenes, but he once again overpowers him, as Spidey's webs and attacks are rendered useless against his hydro body. Later, Peter develops a web fluid that turns into concrete after coming into contact with water. Meanwhile, Hydro-Man abducts Mary Jane and reveals that he was the one behind all the thefts, as he was collecting the jewelry for her. Spider-Man finds them and takes on Hydro-Man once again. This time, he is able to have an upper hand in the fight with his new web fluid. Mary Jane helps out as well. She makes him chase her and pushes a huge pile of paper on Hydro-Man. She attacks him with a bucket filled with dust and rushes to the roof, taking Hydro-Man away from a water source. Spider-Man waits there for him, but Hydro-Man is now severely weakened due to being far from water. He tries to attack Spidey, who dodges him and allows Hydro-Man to disappear as his body evaporates. Mary Jane even suspects if he is dead or not, but Spider-Man mitigates her concern by mentioning how he could return as Rain. Number 9. Spider-Man fights Mysterio to his death. Spider-Man Far From Home, 2019. Spider-Man Far From Home is the second standalone Spider-Man movie from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It features Tom Holland as Peter Parker and is set after the events of Avengers Endgame. Following Tony Stark's death, Peter is chosen as the successor for Edith, Tony Stark's AI glasses. In the film, Peter goes on a trip to Europe from his school. However, the sites keep getting attacked by huge creatures called the Elementals. A new superhero called Quentin Beck, or Mysterio, helps Spider-Man out in the fights. Meanwhile, Peter feels like he does not deserve to wield Stark's glasses, especially since he had accidentally called a drone strike on his school bus. He gives Beck the glasses for safekeeping, and in Peter's absence, it is revealed that the Elementals were all an illusion to make Beck look like the hero. He wanted the glasses from the start to help him carry out his fraud heroics on a large scale, so that he could pretend to be an Avenger-level superhero. Peter realizes this after seeing the debris retrieved by MJ, which had a projector that showed him the projection of the air elemental. He contacts Happy Hogan and tries to track Beck down in London.
We need to have a serious conversation about you and my aunt!
Beck uses Edith to create terrible illusions, but Peter manages to fight it off, as he is now aware that they are not real. Beck tries to kill off Peter's friends, but Peter reaches him just in time. Beck uses the drones from Stark Industry to attack him while putting him in a hallucination. With his spider senses, Peter senses the drones and goes berserk on them. He brilliantly brings down the drones with his webs, attacks, and uses the broken pieces to destroy the other drones. Beck feels threatened and orders the drones to fire at Peter, even though Edith mentions how Beck was in the line of fire himself. The drones attack Peter, who manages to evade it all by taking more drones down, but Beck intercepts some of the shots and ultimately dies. However, before dying, he reveals to the world that Spider-Man had killed him, and that the man behind the mask is none other than Peter Parker.
No! Get your hands off me! Let go, you fool!
Number 10. Spider-Man electrocutes Chameleon. Spider-Man the Animated Series. Day of the Chameleon is the final episode from the first season of the animated series. It is a monumental episode as it introduces not just Chameleon, but also Nick Fury and S.H.I.E.L.D. Peter Parker asks to tag along with J. Jonah Jameson for an event where the world leaders of two sparring countries will sign a peace treaty. While on the way, their limo is hijacked, and the two of them are relocated to a secret location. Nick Fury introduces himself, and the location is revealed to be the headquarters for S.H.I.E.L.D. He tells Jameson how a deadly assassin named the Chameleon is on the loose, but impossible to track down, as he uses an image-inducing belt to change his appearance. He is supposed to be present during the signing of the treaty, and Fury needed Jameson's help for it. Back at the surface, Chameleon shows up and changes his appearance to pass by, but it does not fool Peter's spider tingles. S.H.I.E.L.D. is alerted and Peter aids them as Spider-Man, but Chameleon slips by once again. Once again, they try to get him, but fail. Due to these problems, the signing was pushed back, which meant the Chameleon could show up once again. On the main day, as the two leaders shook hands, Peter came and sat beside Jameson, hoping to get a shot of the leaders. However, a web caught the camera from nowhere, and the Peter here was revealed to be the Chameleon in disguise. Spider-Man appears and attacks Chameleon, shooting his webs to incapacitate Chameleon's legs. He kicks away the laser from the villain's hands, and with a punch, breaks the image inducer. Without the aid of the device, Chameleon begins to transform uncontrollably. He is overwhelmed by the electric currents from the shock and ends up fainting. S.H.I.E.L.D. swoops in and takes him into custody, while Fury thanks Spider-Man. What are your favorite Savage Spider-Man moments? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to send a like and subscribe to our channel, if you haven't already, that is. For Marvelous Videos, I'm Ryland. Have a good one, be safe, and thanks for watching.